r/AskReddit. Men of Reddit, what are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? My roommate was very wealthy and her boyfriend ended up living with us for 2 years, and I remember they would have the solemn fights all the time. He came from a very poor household, tough family life, in a not so great area of the city, didn't graduate high school, etc. He was supporting himself working as a bartender. Compared to his childhood financial situation, he viewed supporting himself with a steady job as being successful, whereas she was always wanting him to do more, be bigger, etc. They also fought a lot over birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, etc. She would buy him really expensive gifts that he needed, but couldn't afford to buy himself. He needed new winter boots and a coat, so she would buy him really nice ones for Christmas. A good coat and boots with 1 or 2 other items can easily get close to $5-600. He could never get her a gift of such magnitude. She was somewhat understanding that he couldn't pay for something like that, but he used to tell me he always felt a lot of pressure to match her really expensive gifts with really creative ones. He said he would dread holidays, Valentine's Day and birthdays, because he would get so stressed out trying to constantly think of creative ways to match her really expensive gifts. It seemed to me like he was getting really bitter about having so much stress over creating a gift versus her being able to spend 5 minutes using her parents' money to get him something. I think it was also tough because she wanted to do so much stuff and had the financial security to do it. She wanted to travel a lot, and he just couldn't afford it. She would pay for him sometimes, but that bothered him. I met up with them once when I was living in Thailand, and she kept using phrases like "this is so cheap for." Like she would insist we got to the most expensive restaurants in the area, because a comparative restaurant in the States would be way more expensive. She also had a massive inheritance. She doesn't have access to it till she's 35, but he used to tell me he was so bitter that he would probably have to work his whole life until he was dead and would probably never make enough to really retire, whereas she could basically stop working at 35 if she wanted. They dated for 4 years, but it eventually fell apart. Let me tell a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or when they would come to visit their kids at school. By all accounts, Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back. Not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport, think Cessnas, and the closest major airport is several hours away by car, and neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and grandpa were very close, and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word, Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe and my friend and her family were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went, and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other, and neither did Joe. They are now married and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell live a very normal life. But every once in a while they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year and don't tell anyone but their family where they're going. Not the man, but the rich girl. I hope you guys are interested in my story. I come from a family who built their way in the world and got very wealthy. Growing up, my parents had me and my sister working regular jobs, so we would learn the value of money. It worked. Back then, I was not allowed to date anyone until I was 18. Not that I ever cared, because I was a nerd and preferred my video games to real people. When I got older and nature decided to kick in, I was starting college and I met a guy. He was very handsome and did not seem to care who my family was. I was pleased because most people would fake to be my friends because of my background. That lasted until I met his parents. He was from a lower middle class family and his parents were all about the "what are the neighbors going to think" mindset. They are so excited about me that they started being so weird, buying a Mercedes that they could not afford, buy nice clothes, expensive wines. The guy just got terrible after a few years. We moved together in a very nice downtown condo and he went mad. He loaded his credit card to buy expensive watches, suits, shoes. My dad got him a job in a good company and I guess he thought he was a big shot now. I left him about 6 months later because he was trying to change me into a trophy wife. He was getting upset if I did not have my coupon or if I was gaming in my PJs all day/night because if someone would have knocked the door and I was dressed like that, what would they have thought? When I left, I was still paying for the condo he was living in. His parents were harassing me about their son's future and trying to manipulate me into going back. I'm not that stupid. I tried to get him to buy me out of the condo. He did not want it to. We got into a massive legal fight. It was terrible. I have other stories if you are interested. Sorry for the English, not my first language. My wife is very well off. She is a super successful doctor. She makes enough money that I don't have to work. When we started dating, I was a single father living in my parents' basement. I can say this with all honesty. If she is a good person, her money doesn't matter. The people with bad experiences didn't have bad experiences with rich women. They had bad experiences with shitty people who happened to be rich. My wife was amazing. Never made me feel bad. Supported me. Helped me find a career I flourished and succeeded at. Her money has never been an issue in any way. She is my best friend and the struggles are as such. I get to fly first class to amazing places and stay in swanky hotels. I get to make dinner and pack lunches for her for work as she works crazy hours sometimes. I get to use that time to do tons of gaming and playing with my kid. We bought a huge awesome acreage and I'll be retiring before 40 to take care of the property, her and my son. Her family is kind and loving and hilarious, super welcoming, and love my son like one of their own. They love how happy I make her and how much I take care of her. There's never been a single thing other than normal relationship fights we all occasionally have. Oh, there is one thing. She often forgets I don't make the same amount of money, so when I bought a new vehicle she wanted us to go buy a fancy thing and I wanted to buy my own vehicle that was economical and probably used. We compromised and bought a new, but not flashy truck. Also, she will spend more on a purse than I would for a used car, and I can't for the life of me wrap my head around it. But I grew up dirt poor, like no toys and spam poor, so we just grew up in different worlds. Anyways, all this babbling to say, if she is a good person raised by good people, and he or she isn't an insecure child, there are no issues, only delightful perks you never expected. I have a thing for strong women, so her making so much more money than me never bugged me. I'm just very proud of her and her passion and ambition, and that she chose me. I often joke I'm living every 1960s girl's dream. She often jokes that she worked this hard so she could marry poor if that's what she fell in love with. Guilt when she bought me shit all the time. It made her happy, but it got to the point where I would just not look at things if we were in a store together, because if I showed the slightest interest she'd buy it for me. I mentioned wanting to go to New York City for night one day. She happened to be visiting relatives in Jersey for Christmas. The next day she tells me she booked a hotel a few blocks from Central Park and has bought me a plane ticket to meet her in Jersey. I fly out there. She then proceeds to get us a cab to New York City. I told her Greyhound would be like $50 total for the both of us, but she wanted to be comfortable, so we got a really nice cab that ended up costing her like $350. So we get to New York City. We go to the museum, all kinds of stores, go to the Empire State Building, restaurants every night, all on her dime. We go through Chinatown and I go into a little toy shop because it had some cool looking stuff. I see a really cool MGS3 naked snake in sneaking suit figure by Hot Toys. MGS is my favorite game series. So I look at it, I think it's pretty awesome. I put it back. I browse the shop some more, and she suddenly leaves my side. I don't think about it. I walk up toward the front and I see her paying for the damn thing. I felt so guilty. I was happy because it's pretty damn awesome, but I felt like a piece of shit. Another day we are walking in Times Square, and she notices a street vendor making hats with custom artwork on them, and a lot of them have Street Fighter characters on them. She proceeds to get one made for me with my favorite Street Fighter character on it. Once again, super cool and very appreciative of her, but I felt so guilty. We eventually broke up, but not because of her buying me stuff. Also not because she didn't buy me stuff anymore, lol. We broke up because she was a self-harmer and would cut herself, which drained me, and she also went on 3 drunken rampages in which I had to get my friends to help with, since she'd be too embarrassed to continue her outburst while they were around. Not a man, but the rich girl in this scenario, complete with horses. It took me a long time to find a man who was secure enough in themselves and their career to deal with it. But we are down home people and my parents are literally the most welcoming people on the face of the earth. I have a girlfriend whose dad passed away a couple of years ago. Her parents' combined income was less than my friend's, but she wasn't really in a financial spot to send all of her disposable income home. My parents wrote her mom a check to cover all of her dad's medical expenses with no expectation of ever being paid back and immediately booked her a first-class ticket home. They would give you the shirt off of their backs and expect me and my siblings to exhibit those same values. Both of my parents grew up poor and in the South. Moved to California in the 70s. Both worked their way up the corporate ladder. Dad sold some companies along the way to the IBMs and Ciscos of the world. Now we are very comfortable. I fly private more than I fly commercial. I didn't pay for college, and I now have a corporate job where I'm personally taking home $400k plus per year. It's all about perspective. I work my ass off because it was the example set to me. I completely understand the outside perspective that I was handed everything in my life because nepotism and yup, I'm rich. But I graduated from high school with a 4.5 GPA, was a 3-sport varsity athlete, got a full-ride academic scholarship, graduated from college in 3 years, and have busted my butt to build my own career. My parents showed us the value of $1 from childhood. We didn't have an allowance growing up, we had to work for our money. I don't touch my trust fund until I'm 35, and even then there are restrictions on how and what I can spend money on. It's not that I care solely about money, or that my parents push us towards that. They want us to be happy, and would support us in any endeavor that brings us joy. But when you grow up seeing the most influential people in your lives work tirelessly to provide for your family, it becomes your default setting. I have dated people all over the socio-economic spectrum, and ended up with someone who is also a high earner. Obviously, we are not at the same level as my parents, but I had to find a partner who has the same drive and spirit that I do to provide for our future family. I have capitalized on the opportunities afforded to me, and I would be disappointed in myself if I hadn't turned those opportunities into my own personal success. My husband and I do well for ourselves, but it has been his family that has been really tough for us to deal with. He grew up lower middle class. Never went to bed hungry, but definitely not wealthy. They live in Central California and absolutely despise that he married up. They have called me every single name under the sun, including his mom calling me a C** in her toast at our wedding. They feel that they have been left behind and expect that we should pay for their every little whim because he married a spoiled little rich girl. They have not taken the opportunity or initiative to know me beyond the big house and the Amex card. All they see is $$. They sent me an invoice for their mortgage recently. His mom asked me for a Mercedes for Christmas, and it wasn't a joke. It's such a shame because we probably would help them out if they weren't so overtly unkind to me and taking every opportunity to undermine our marriage. I guess my one key takeaway here is, although I'm wealthy and can solve a lot of problems with money, there are some things you can't. I do understand that some people are out of touch with reality, but not all of us. I'm very comfortable, and I want my kids to also have the same opportunities that I did, but they've got to work for it too. I once dated a decently rich girl. Her family's wealth was, I'd imagine, in the tens of millions, maybe getting close to 100 meters. They bought their current house in cash that was worth easily over $2 million, maybe pushing $3 million. To be honest, it didn't change much. She was very particular about brands when she shopped for things for herself, so I tended to buy her types of gifts that were one size fits all, like computer components. She was a gamer. Her parents gave her an allowance, but she refused most of it. She accepted them paying for her college and her rent, but was very frugal outside of that and took as little of their money as possible. I got the impression that she liked nice things, but she was not an idiot about money. She never made me feel low for having less money. The only thing that comes to mind is that she was very paranoid about food contamination. Huge germaphobe and would throw away any food that wasn't extremely fresh. I once made her a nice dinner that involved pasta, and when I strained the pasta in the sink, I put the colander down in the sink and poured the pasta in, but because the pasta water was touching the clean sink and the pasta at the same time, it technically had fluid contact, and she refused to eat any of the dinner I made for her. Her parents wanted to take me to a nice dinner at one point, and, due to a lack of nice restaurants in the area, they brought me to a casino to eat extremely overpriced food, just because it had slightly better ambience. Appreciated the gesture. It definitely made me realize that they had money to throw away. I think a lot of this is because her father was entirely self-made. When I say entirely, I mean entirely. He literally came to the USA as a refugee from a poor area in Vietnam, I believe around the time of the fall of Saigon. He managed to get a bachelor's, master's, then I believe PhD in petroleum engineering. He is actually one of the most important people in the industry now, and while I was dating his daughter he was making $1M plus per year for very few hours of work. He retired, got bored, then started a consulting company at around the same time, and I imagine it's doing very well. He's a pretty big inspiration to me. Things eventually went south with the girl. Money wasn't the issue. She had a lot of mental health issues that she needed to address that didn't seem to be related to her family being rich. Just wasn't meant to be. I've dated one, and I'll probably never date one again. Her family owns several businesses, tens of millions of dollars. I'm probably at the middle class range. I make about 6 figures. Long story short, I'm pretty confident we would still be together if it weren't for her family's wealth, which had a lot of influence on her behavior. A couple things that stood out to me during our relationship. Her mom was a housewife that had no income of her own. Meanwhile, there was a lot of suspicion that the dad was cheating, but her mom couldn't really do anything about it because if she left him, she would have no way of supporting herself. While she was explaining this to me, she also said that this is a pretty normal thing to happen to people like them, based on what she hears from her wealthy friends. Because of this, her mom instilled a pretty hard work ethic onto her and emphasized that she should work on her ability to take care of herself and not to rely on other people's money. Ironically, by the end of the relationship, I found out her mom specifically told her not to date me because I was working class and said to stop wasting her time since I would not be able to maintain her lifestyle if we continued. Her last boyfriend was the son of a CEO who owned a private company that was apparently worth hundreds of millions / billions of dollars. Her mom wanted her to continue dating this dude, but my ex didn't like how he partied all the time and didn't take care of his health / workout. She still kept in contact with him after they broke up because they both worked in the same industry. When he found out she was with me, he basically told her to let him know when she's ready to be with him again. since there's no way I could take of her financially the way he could. During our final days together, she made an offhanded comment and asked why she couldn't find someone that was a combination of me and this ex, which I pretty much took it as I was too broke for her. Keeping up appearances was huge. I had a brand new wardrobe by the end of the relationship, since she would buy clothes for me without asking. I do dress for the occasion, but it was like I had to be on every time I went out in public with her. I think a lot of her perceived value / social value came from how others saw her. If I dressed poorly and she dressed nicely, she said it was equivalent of me saying I didn't care if people thought about her. An example is, if you're dressed like a hobo, other people would assume the people you're chilling with are also hobos. She lived in a huge house by herself. At one point she complained that her house was too big while her family lived in another country, so she was pretty independent. It definitely won't work out if you're clingy and trying to date a rich girl. She was smoking hot on top of being rich, so she had a lot of guys orbiting her 24/7, with some of them being friends that have been trying to get with her for years. She would tell me stories about how she would go on dates with some of these dudes who end up trying to get her drunk and then confessing their feelings despite having girlfriends. She threw a lot of bomb house parties and guys would always be all over her or leave things like sweaters behind so they could come over a little later to pick it up when it was only the two of them around. Just imagine a constant barrage of dudes constantly trying to shoot their shot, which includes dudes / friends sending half-naked selfies of themselves that she would show me from time to time. Long story short, a lot of her male friends hated my guts and would make a lot of passive-aggressive comments when they saw me. The turning point of the relationship was when she went out of the country to visit her family / friends for a few weeks. Before she left, she was extremely affectionate and was asking me to move in with her. When she returned, her demeanor completely changed and she ended up saying a lot of fucked up shit that you can't really take back, so we ended it shortly afterwards. I found out later that she spent a lot of time with her mom and they had conversations about how she was planning on maintaining her standard of living in the future if she continued to be with me. I'm also pretty sure her wealthy friends asked about me, which would make things embarrassing for her, since she explained to me that the culture of her home country / group of friends is extremely shallow and revolves around how much money someone has. I think the constant external factors chipping away and questioning her on her dating choice could have explained the 360 change in her personality when she returned. She told me she had an epiphany or woke up to what we were when she was with her family / friends. Overall, we got along extremely well together, which was why I really didn't want to lose her friendship / companionship and was pretty hesitant to get into a relationship with her myself at one point. It was pretty fun while it lasted, but I don't think it was worth the drama, mental toll, and the amount of time I wasted, since I straight up told her she had to be okay with me not being at her financial level, otherwise I'd rather not risk the friendship we built. The worst part about this is I was really attached to her dumbass cat and miss not seeing him anymore. It was kind of weird for me. I dated someone who, while theoretically independent, was still very tethered to her family, which is fairly well connected and wealthy for the area I live in. I say theoretically independent because she worked her own job and had her own 2-bedroom apartment, but she still relied quite a bit, more than she was willing to admit, on the parents for help. I live in a very expensive part of the country, so while she got an okay wage at a specialized healthcare job, it definitely wasn't enough. She was insecure and entitled at the same time. It didn't help that she had only just moved back to the area from overseas recently after a failed marriage due to the guy cheating, so there was a good deal of additional baggage. She wanted a better job, but when it came time to brass tacks about the specifics, she would get weirdly demanding for lots of perks up front. I tried to caution her against being too demanding, especially because her overseas nursing certification had yet to translate to being recognized here, something which she claimed to be working on, but I never saw her really doing anything about. She just felt that she was entitled from the get-go to having a budget granted for continuing education and lots of other things despite not having the credentials, in theory, to justify it. So it was a strange combination of her being quite used to getting very nice things, but feeling poor as her post-divorce slush fund was running out, and her job wasn't keeping up. She acted very entitled to my time. She wanted me to move in with her, in part to reduce the financial burden of renting a 2-bedroom apartment here, but of course, to spend more time with me. The problem was that it would more than double my already strenuous commute to work. I had tried to make it work before, but having to drive over 2 hours to work and then another 2 hours back was just torture. Sadly, I was actually planning on buying a house with my own resources, but she completely lost her shit after I couldn't make living with her 24/7 work. So it was weird. On one hand, her parents would ask me to buy a case of champagne worth $600 or $700 for them, and then pay me back in $100 bills. On the other, she plead poverty, while never really being in any real jeopardy. Her parents didn't want to be an umbilical cord forever, but they wouldn't have let her get evicted. And to be sure, even though I was quite secure financially myself, I bought a house in one of the most expensive parts of the country, I was intimidated from time to time by just how substantially wealthy they were. I certainly would like to think I could have provided a similar level of largesse, but still, it got to me. Just finalized my divorce from a rich woman. She made a little over $200k/e plus a bunch of stock options and other benefits, so interpret that how you will. We owned a $475k house and have lived pretty frugally aside from home improvement. We bought it for $315 and $475 was a last appraisal. We have twin toddlers together. I make $50k/year. It blows. I was a stay-at-home dad for 3 years and really loved it, despite having to burn a bridge at my last union trade job to make it happen. When we put our kids in daycare and I went back to work in a different trade that didn't pay as much, things went south. Our kids are doing great. They like having 2 houses and probably get more attention than they did when we were together. They are too young to really be sad about it so far. They are brilliant and happy, thank goodness. We have, pretty much, 50/50 custody. I got a bunch of money and maintenance, alimony, from the divorce and I didn't fight it as much as I could, because I wanted to keep the peace. The big downside is that I've always been, and still am in love with her. There was no infidelity, no abuse of any kind on either side, no suspicion, etc. We've always gotten along aside from quibbles about chores or other normal marital things, and never even yelled, as far as I can remember. I would give every penny away and have her quit her job if it meant that I could have her back and live on my much smaller income. It's absolutely possible to be happy without a bunch of money and I would take it in a heartbeat. We have always been very different people, but after 18 years together, 13 years of marriage, and 4 years as parents of twins, she felt like we were still getting too far apart. The more successful her career went, the more she seemed to be upset with me. I started to feel really depressed and inadequate and that led to me drinking more and hiding it. You can guess where it went from there. Now she had a pretty good reason to leave me. I quit drinking several months before we got divorced and I thought things were getting stagnant, but about to get better. Turns out she had an attorney for several months by that point, had paperwork drafted, and didn't have any intentions of going back. She insisted that she still wanted to be friends, but it's clear she's angry that I got what I did from the divorce. I'll let her keep her stock in exchange for lower child support payments, since I don't make much and don't want to just drain savings for the next 18 plus years. She currently has about $225k in stock, but expects her company to be purchased in the next few years, and that could almost double what she gets in return. I really thought she intended to stay friends after all this, if nothing else. I wish I could give her everything back to keep it that way, but you obviously can't just pay for real friends, and everybody told me it would be stupid to settle without an attorney. At least we don't fight, I guess. Yeesh. If you're still reading this, thanks for letting me vent. Maybe this was better suited for a different comment or subreddit. Sorry. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.